Welcome to AI at Work, a podcast which is part of the Tech Talks network. And in this podcast, we're going to venture into the transformative influence of artificial intelligence inside the workplace. And our discussions will focus on both the remarkable breakthroughs, but also the complex challenges of integrating AI into our everyday business functions and workflows. What if your AI program isn't failing because of the tech, but because the work itself hasn't changed? So my guest today will talk about everything from pilots that stall to teams that ship value, the things that he's seeing, and how he is mapping a simple lens for momentum, solve real constraints, and then apply AI where it's actually useful, and compartmentalize risk so you can prove it in production. And if AI is an indiscriminate amplifier, what happens when you point it at the right problem and the right way of working? He's an incredibly cool guy, knows his stuff, and some pure gold. A quick thank you to our sponsor, Careerist, before we dive into today's episode. Because not everyone wants to spend their time learning how to code to get that elusive career in tech. And with Careerist QA Bootcamp, you don't have to. In just 4 months, you can have live training, a remote internship, and a career coaching that sets you up for success. Because in a world of job layoffs, QA is one of the fastest growing fields in tech. And there are currently 37,000 openings in the US right now, and with salaries up to $105,000. And Careerist grads, they're working at companies in 42 states, and with a very highly respectable 4.7 star Trustpilot rating, I think it's clear the model seems to work. And remember, if you don't land a job within a year, you get your tuition fees back. So what's the catch? Well, the only catch really is that the seats for the next class won't last. So you'll find the link in the show notes. Check it out. Let me know how you get on. Maybe I can get you on the podcast when you get that career in tech and tell me about your journey. But now it's time to get straight into the discussion with my guest today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Kyle. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Daemon. Daemon is a digital and AI transformation company, and rather than focusing on the sort of management consulting side of things, strategies and pitch decks, we're all about delivery. So we bring really good people, experienced people to come help our clients deliver outcomes with technology.
And just to dig a little bit deeper and maybe help bring that to life a little, tell me a little bit more about the kind of work that you do with organizations, especially around all things digital transformation. And dare I say it, AI is a tech podcast and an AI podcast. So we've got to mention AI, but tell me about some of the work that you're doing here.
Yeah, so we've been around for 18 years. Because our model is hiring talent that are sort of at the bleeding edge of technology, we tend to ride these waves as we go through. So it started off in DevOps and cloud migration when that was really taking off, almost 2 decades ago, and we really sort of bedded the business in that area, and then expanded out into software engineering, where we work with a whole bunch of other financial institution companies to deliver on different things, build back-end systems usually. And then as the sort of progressing out and moving into AI, which is, the next wave, and a wave that started in the 60s, I think the ChatGPT Gen AI has sort of subsumed the whole category, but it definitely feels like it's gaining a lot of momentum now, and at least people are starting to talk about it. And what's really nice about those conversations is we can start having, okay, well, large language models not going to be the fix-all silver bullet here. You might need predictive analytics. You might need some of the more, dare I say, traditional artificial intelligence to help deliver what you're trying to deliver. But that conversation is happening a lot more than it ever did before, and that's really exciting for us.
And as you said, there are so many conversations right now. That's what dominates just about everything all around the world. And the theme of this podcast is trying to get beyond the hype and try and determine what AI looks like in the workplace. How are we going to work with it? And of course, over the last, 3 years, many companies start with AI pilots with enthusiasm. But many have it's been well documented that many have fizzled out without delivering value. Some don't make it out of pilot phase at all. So from your perspective, why are so many of these programs failing over the last few years? Is it because they just wanted to be part of something rather than focusing on problem first? Or was it something else?
It's really multifaceted. I think one of the fairly contrarian things that we tell our clients, which isn't strictly true in the core sense of it, and I'll explain why, is you don't need an AI strategy. You need a business strategy, and then AI is going to be something that helps you deliver on your business objectives. Now, that might sort of filter out into a strategy on how you're going to use AI, which would be an AI strategy. So that's what I mean by it's not strictly true, but it is one of the reasons that organizations find themselves in that space. There's this almost fear of missing out around a technology, a new wave, where it's like if we're not doing something, we're going to be behind our competitors, because for sure our competitors are doing something. So we got to be doing something. So what that happens, typically in the bigger organizations, is this edict comes down from the executive, where it's like, you got to be doing something with AI right now. There is, and it's not strict. Again, it's not strictly fair. There's a lot of organizations, particularly a lot of our clients, that have good talent and good capability inside, but it's definitely limited. There's not a huge amount of that capability available in the market or otherwise. And definitely at the executive space, it's typically understanding the core business, of which technology is not always the core function, that know they're going to be doing something, but are not sure what that looks like. So then just this message comes down to the team, get going, do something with AI. And that doesn't always lead to coherent applications or use cases, so sometimes they're not looking at practical constraints, and that means that it's not necessarily viable. So when you get to demo day, then the powers that be, as it were, are kind of like, well, it's not hitting the mark, or it doesn't really make sense, or whatever the case is. But then there's a whole bunch of other reasons. Risk being one of those reasons, because with new waves comes a whole bunch of dissonance. There's a lot of noise in the market, and that noise is uncertainty, and uncertainty is the other side of a coin. Is two sides of a coin, and the one side is uncertain, the other side is risk. And when there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of risk. And I think particularly in this market where, capital's not necessarily as free flowing as it was in the past, being a little bit more prudent about where you place your bets and take risks is a factor preventing clients moving ahead with AI pilot. But then the last thing I'd say is that particularly in the last sort of 12 months, we've seen a lot of our clients move ahead with their pilots, go beyond that phase and start working in a little bit of more of a meaningful manner, albeit in localized specific areas. So it's definitely shifting as it becomes more mature, as people become more comfortable with it. But yeah, and that is by no means an exhaustive list. There's a whole bunch of reasons.
And before you came on the podcast, I was doing a little research on you, and I was reading how you've often talked about the difference between AI added and AI first. So tell me a little bit more about that distinction. What does it mean in practice, and what does it matter for outcomes?
So that is a really, really good question. And I was actually talking about this over drinks last night with some potential new clients. And I think where it really stems is both ways of working and accountability, right? These are sort of two things that are quite important in this conversation. And the ways of working is an interesting one. And that's part of the reason why we launched in the first squad, is we understand that with software engineering, as an example, you've got AI co-pilots that help you generate code. Now, you generate the code much, much quicker. So you've saved 4 hours, let's say, for argument's sake. and then it goes into the rest of the software development lifecycle and it gets stuck somewhere. And over the periods of the software development lifecycle, you lose out that efficiency, right? Because it doesn't filter through the whole cycle. And what really matters is whiteboard to production, right? The lead time, getting something into a usable state for their customers. And any efficiency that get lost within the system is efficiency that might be realized locally, but it doesn't necessarily filter through to the business and materialize. That's the first thing. And the second one, which I think is actually more interesting, and it lends itself to the first, is where does accountability sit when you start talking about like agentic AI, right? Because again, it's a conversation of risk. So right now you've got a team lead who's got a team of 6 people, let's say. We move, maybe quite a while ahead and you've got a team of, let's say, 50 agents. All of a sudden, that one person is taking accountability for 50 quote unquote people, whether they're digital people or humans. And there's still the same kind of risk in terms of getting things right and fixing things, because it's not just production that matters. So that's an accountability risk. And how does that shift things? And I think until we get to a place where the organization structures start to shift and evolve to support AI in a more meaningful way, then we're gonna be stuck in a limited use of these tools and methodologies. So I think, in a very long-winded way, to answer your question more directly, AI added is adding tools to existing ways of working. AI first is looking at how do we change the way we work in order to gain as much of the advantage that these tools can offer.
So on behalf of every business leader listening that might be exploring how they can work with AI, what it looks like in the workplace, what does a practical roadmap look like, especially when they're moving from proof of concept experiments to enterprise-wide adoption, and adoption that genuinely changes how a business operates rather than just getting stuck for months or even years in pilot phase? And anything you can share around that?
I think it's quite a difficult question to answer, because every organization has their own constraints and their own ways of working, their own limitations. Larger organizations see AI in any statement of work or any business case or proposal, and suddenly there's a new legal department that is looking at it specifically, which can delay the processes and end up with things not moving forward. So it really does depend on the organization. What I would say is looking at, and I love a Venn diagram. It's something you're going to know me. I love a Venn diagram. But if you look at the intersection of usefulness, of constraints, and of compartmentalization. So just to unpack those 3 things quickly, is it a constraint in your business? Is it a friction point? Is there an employee or department that is feeling pain around a specific thing? Then is it useful? Is applying AI to that constraint going to materially or practically make a difference? Because it may not, right? AI is not the silver bullet. It's not going to solve anything. It's more of an indiscriminate amplifier than a silver bullet. And then the last thing is compartmentalization. Is that constraint or problem sort of removed from maybe high risk or really core business functions so that you can move forward to production with limited, red tape? Because then that's going to get you to a place where you can prove that something works in production. You can do it in a fairly safe manner. It can provide business value. And then you're ticking all of the boxes to go to, whoever your business stakeholders and say, look, we've got some return on investment here. We've done it in a safe way. It's live in production. And, here are the results, warts and all. And then that can mean you move into a better place with talking about some broader use cases. So I think that's an interesting one. I'll give you a good example, and it's something that we did ourselves, right? So in a technology consultancy, and if you ask any software engineer who's worked at a technology consultancy, one of the things they hate more than anything is documentation. It is just a laborious thing to do. And while technical documentation is super, super important, and they get it, so it's a grudge exercise with purpose. When it comes to a case study, it really feels like a hard piece of work. Because I've spent 18 months doing this project, slaving away, and now you're telling me to go through every single pain point throughout the process again and then write it down. And what we found is if we set up a call, and we're on Google, so Gemini is sort of integrated in everything we do in a safe and data friendly way, which I think is a critical point for organizations to think about. Like, where are they embedded in already, and how do you use their tool sets? Because there's a fair amount of parity there. So we set up a transcript and then talk about the project. So we sit for half an hour and we talk through the project. What did we learn? What were the highs? What are the lows? And we transcribe it and then generate a case study out of that. Obviously, we still need to edit it and everything, but a whole bunch of the work is done. And an interesting second order effect is it's more human, right? It's no longer one person sitting going through. It's a communal process, which we found as quite an interesting use case. And I realize it's a small one, but it's one that has had a profound effect on us as a business and is quite cool because of the human element.
And I think AI is not about replacing workers. Let's get it straight out there. And there is an increasing argument that people are more important than ever in the workplace. So I guess the big question is, how do you balance that role of AI with that irreplaceable need for human judgment, human accountability, and indeed context in decision making?
Well, I think that last point is what says it all, is decision making. It is still a model. It's a very fancy model. It's a very complex model. And there's certain elements that we don't fully understand in terms of, and maybe that's just me, my sort of Luddite brain, but it's very complex. But what you put in, right, as any model, what you get out is a function of what you put in, right? There's no entity that is thinking or deciding or anything like that. It is a model that is processing data. And I think that's the key to all of this is there's still going to be someone that needs to take accountability around a decision, because you can't hold a model accountable for something. And that means that these tools are always going to have to assist someone in doing something rather than just doing things in of themselves. Now, it's a nuanced thing because, as I said, with agents and the move into that world, there's a lot more autonomous actions that can be done, but the intent is still uniquely human, that intent to get something done. And I think that's always going to be the case. And, these tools are just going to help more and more people get more and more done.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And I think one of the dangers is a lot of people hear things like AI first and immediately just think it means starting right from scratch. And of course, that's not the case at all. So, well, maybe it is. I'll throw this over to you. Do you think organizations really need to rebuild everything from the ground up, or is there a way to evolve existing systems and maybe some of their legacy setups without getting stuck into bolt-on mode? What do you see here?
They should, right? But should land is a wonderful place where everything happens as it should. The reality is not practical, right? Yeah. Particularly in big organizations. Going through that level of organizational change, even if you're just focusing on software engineering as a function or capability within the organization, to go and unearth the entire process and start from scratch is just not feasible. So how we do it is we'll come into a client and we'll do 1 or 2 week discovery period. We'll go and we'll say, right, what is the state of play now? Where are things getting stuck in the cycle? Where what is working, what is not working? Because you don't want to just if it's not broke, don't fix it. And then we say, okay, how can we start iteratively making changes to, sort of smoothen out the whole process? And that could be with requirements, because there's a whole bunch of value you get from AI in terms of scrutinizing requirements when you're building something, which has massive downstream benefits. And it can be testing. There's a whole bunch of areas within the software development lifecycle that is not just generating code that AI can help. And we look for those constraints, those sort of bottlenecks, and help smooth it out. Sometimes that means more material changes, but it does depend on the organization and what the appetite is, Yeah.
Yeah, and I think another problem that I increasingly see is it's not about the technology itself. There is so many big organizational changes, cultural changes that are required to ensure any new tech project, not just AI, gets adopted, gets embraced, and you reap the benefits as a result. So on that side of things, if we look beyond the tech itself here, what role does upskilling, cultural change, and all these things play in making these AI programs really stick in the long term?
Yeah, it's another really good question that's been keeping me up at night. And I think you touched on something very important. It's my favorite question for C-suite technology execs, and that is, when was the last time a project failed because of technology? It's always people. It's always the sort of meat machine that a misalignment of, what you're trying to achieve, misalignment on the problem, misalignment on the solution. That's really where projects go off track. The interesting thing is that it's not necessarily the tool set that I think in the long term is going to require the training, right? Because, the immediate thought is prompt engineering, right? That's a big area of focus. But if you look at the cost of improvement, and with large language models, there's sort of three big pillars, and that is compute, data, and the actual algorithms, the actual model itself. The model itself is a massive innovation cost. It's a lot of time and money to improve algorithms, and the more you improve them, it's harder to get better. It's like an asymptote. You tend towards perfection, but you never quite get there. Compute is really a function of energy, which we all know energy is quite an expensive thing, and there's a big water cost to compute too. And then when it comes to data, there's a fuzzy ceiling in terms of how much data is available in the internet. And then there's a whole bunch of private data sets where organizations can get their own sort of alpha value. So when you look at how expensive it is to improve those three pillars, where is the focus going to be? In my opinion, the focus is going to go to improving the input. So how do we help humans improve the prompts so that they can get better outputs? Because again, it's a model, so the output's a function of the input. And I think that there's going to be a lot of investment by the frontier models themselves to help improve the contextualization of prompts, which means that, in my mind at least, it's inevitable that even though prompt engineering is an important thing now and prompting is an important thing now, I don't think it's always going to be an important thing. I think it's a fairly inexpensive thing to improve given the three pillars. However, it still requires a change in the way you think. And I think that is probably the most important part of upskilling is sort of getting your employees to start thinking about challenging the way they work every day. Because another thing, we talk about generating code and software engineering as a big area of value from AI, but no one talks about how much AI is really, well, when I say no one, few people are talking about how much AI is affecting the middle management layer. Thinking about ideas, bouncing ideas off, soundboarding stuff, looking for structures. So you don't need to keep thinking, okay, well, I'm doing a public sector bid. What is the best structure for how I put this bid? All of a sudden, that grunt work is something that can be outsourced. And having access to large layers of strategic information, what are my competitors doing, research, etc. That is an immense amount of value that comes to the middle management layer. So for me, the training is really about exposure to the tools. That's a very important thing, how you use them. And prompting right now is an important thing. But really challenging yourself to see, how can I use this without sacrificing the value that I bring in terms of my experience, in terms of my individuality, in terms of my intent, as we've spoken about, and how do I make sure that I'm then scrutinizing the output and not just being lazy, and saying, okay, because and I'm sure you read stuff online and you see an M dash or overuse of a semicolon, and you know what I mean. It's like, I see what you're doing.
And delve, everything's delve. So we're going to delve.
Exactly. And now, it's even down to formatting of sentences. So one of the things is, it's not that, but that. That's like a format that is quite popular in the large language model outputs. So I think, scrutinizing and making it your own and ensuring that what has been presented or what has been output has then your opinion, your so what to it, your experience to it, and that you make sure that it's true and get lazy. And I think that's the area that really needs to be focused on in terms of asking. Because the reality is, as generations progress, my 6-year-old knows how to use ChatGPT. So it's going to be ingrained in the waves of generations coming up. So it'll become ubiquitous, but it's just about challenging the way you work, I'd say.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you hit such an important point there. You're not just putting the prompt in and accepting everything that it gives you verbatim. It's so important to keep your own voice in there and your own insights, your own experiences. So important. And to give everyone listening maybe a valuable takeaway having listened to our conversation today, what advice would you give to, in particular, any business leaders or teams that are listening who are maybe finding themselves stuck in those endless pilots and proofs of concept, but want to scale with confidence? And most importantly, they're feeling that pressure of having to show some measurable results and ROI from their AI. Any tips on how to get past that?
So I think there's 2 tips. The first, we covered quite a bit is focus on the constraints and that sort of intersection of those 3 areas: compartmentalization, usefulness, and value. Yeah. No, focus on the 3 areas of the Venn diagram that I described earlier, and look at constraints and how you move that forward. But then also try and remember that Gen AI is not all of AI. There are a whole bunch of problems that exist in businesses that can be solved with other, again, more traditional forms of artificial intelligence. And don't be afraid of leaning on experts. And it feels like it's going to be a plug, but leaning on experts to come and understand what is the right solution for the right problem. Because I think right now, the sort of Gen AI is everything, and it is a powerful tool for sure. But there's so many other areas of value that can be sought.
Yeah, 100%. And thank you for highlighting that. Such an important message too. And for yourselves, if they do need that expert or need a bit of guidance or want to bounce ideas around or just have a conversation with you or your team, where can people find you online and dig a little bit deeper on some of the stuff we talked about? Maybe even find that Venn diagram. Where should they go?
dae.mn. So that's Daemon, dae.mn. So you can have a look around there. There's a contact us section, so feel free to reach out. I promise you there are far smarter individuals in our business when it comes to artificial intelligence than I. So reach out, let's have a conversation, and let's see where we can help.
Awesome. Well, I'll add links to everything. Make it easy for everyone to find you. And we covered a lot there, from why most AI programs fail and the practical roadmap needed to break those cycle of endless pilots, and also AI first versus AI added, why that distinction matters and how it can completely transform outcomes. And then also some good news, how to scale with confidence, move from small wins to sustainable organization-wide adoption. So many big talking points. I'd love to hear from people listening what they thought of today's conversation. And I also urge that they check out your website too, where you will find the links in the show notes. But again, just thank you for bringing this to life today.
Thank you for having me.
So having listened to Kyle today, I think one of the big messages here is treat AI as a way to rethink work, keep humans accountable for judgment, and scale by showing value in low-risk corners before you take it enterprise-wide. So yeah, what he's saying is skip those FOMO projects and start where constraints, usefulness and scope, where all these things meet. And after that, level up your people to question outputs and keep their own voice. And if your pilots keep looping without impact, what is the first process that you're going to design on Monday, having listened to this conversation? Let me know your thoughts as always. Remember, we have 8 podcasts over at techtalksnetwork.com. You can leave me an audio message. You can also email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Let me know your thoughts on anything we discussed today. Other than that, I'll be back again very soon with another guest, but let me know your thoughts and I'll speak with you all again very soon. Bye for now.